What's up everyone? Today we're learning 5 more real British accents that you need to know. In case you missed it, we made this lesson not so long ago, which I highly recommend you watch if you haven't seen it, and I'll link it down in the description box below to make it easy for you to find. Due to that lesson's popularity and the many requests we've had, today you're going to be learning the Yorkshire accent, the Queen's English, the Cockney accent, a Scouse accent which is from Liverpool, and also a Scottish one. So first of all, we're going to travel to South Yorkshire, and in fact we're going to Doncaster, or as they would say, Doncaster, because they don't pronounce this long R sound like I do, and we're going to be taking a look at the accent of Louis Tomlinson. Let's take a look at this clip and then we'll talk about some more features of the accent.
When I did an interview with Band, I knew that it was kind of my role to, once it was getting a bit serious, I'll just throw in a joke, you know. Whereas now, you have to then think about everything when you're on your own. Because if I just sit here cracking jokes, you'd be like, who's this guy? Not taking it seriously, you know. So you gotta, it's like starting again, kind of, really.
So the first interesting thing to note here is the way that we pronounce his name, because it could be pronounced in 2 different ways. Some people might say Lewis, and some people might say Louis, and that's how he pronounces his. By the way, in case you're new here, we help you to learn fast English without getting lost, without missing the jokes, and without subtitles. Just like Jay, who says that it's great waking up to our lessons. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so that you don't miss any of our new lessons. There are some very distinctive parts to this South Yorkshire accent, which we'll hear in a moment with one of Louis' interviews. However, one thing in particular is the way that they connect some words. So they have quite a precise connected speech in Yorkshire where they link some words together. For example, instead of saying I'm going to the shop, they'll say I'm going to shop. And you'll hear Louis here as well say something about when he was with the band. He doesn't say with the band, he says with band.
Even this, for example, an interview. When I did an interview with Band.
So this is quite an interesting part of their accent. So in this interview, we hear the reduction of the TH sound. So instead of saying everything or throw, Louis actually says everything and throw.
So once it was getting a bit serious, I'll just throw in a joke, you know. Whereas now, you have to then think about everything when you're on your own.
We also notice the reduction of the H here, which can be found in many British accents. So instead of saying he might say e, and instead of saying who, he says oo.
Because if I just sit here cracking jokes, you'd be like, who's this guy? Not taking it seriously, you know. So you gotta, it's like starting again, kind of, really.
Aww. Before I was in One Direction, I used to say, I'll never have one tattoo and I'll never smoke one cigarette. Not changed. My first tattoo that gave me the bug, maybe 4 out of 5 of One Direction have got them, and we just did little crosses on each other's ankles, just a small cross on each of his ankles. And that kind of gave me the bug, really. Then I got a few more.
In this interview, we have further examples of the reduction of the H, and we also have the glottal T. So the glottal T is when you don't hear the T in words, but instead the flow of air is stopped and then released. So for example, instead of saying butter, some people might say butter. So there is a sound there, but you don't hear the T.
Before I was in One Direction, I used to say, I'll never have one tattoo and I'll never smoke one cigarette.
We also hear that shorter sound here with the U. So instead of saying bug, Louis says bug. And this is very typical of northern accents.
My first tattoo that gave me the bug,
You may remember this from the lesson that we made on Harry Styles' accent, so if you haven't watched that yet, I highly recommend you do, and you can click up here or down in the description box below to watch it later.
One Direction have got them, and we just did little crosses on each other's ankles.
Now the way he says this phrase is very interesting. So he doesn't say have got them. So we have a reduction of the H sound here, we have a glottal T, and we also have a reduction of the TH sound in them. So instead of saying have got them, Louis says,
One Direction have got them, and we just did little crosses on each other's ankles.
In this clip, we again have the reduction of the H, that short sound, and the reduction of the TH sound. However, we also hear him use me instead of my.
I'm lucky with where I grew up. In Doncaster, we wear our art on our sleeves, really, you know what I mean? So it comes naturally to me, really, to kind of just be open about the way that I feel and stuff like that.
We still live in a society where it's still seen as a bit of a taboo, or there's this stigma around men talking about vulnerability and that kind of thing. What's that journey been like for you with that whole stereotype? Have you ever felt that level of stereotype?
I mean, I'm aware of it, but how I operate personally, I've always kind of owned it, really. You know, I think my mum did a good job of bringing me up and taught me good values and stuff like that.
So instead of saying, I think my mum did a good job, he says, I think my mum did a good job.
You know, I think my mum did a good job of bringing me up.
And again, this is very typical of Northern English accents. We also hear a short I sound at the end of words that end with Y. So instead of saying personally, he says...
Personally, I've always kind of owned it, really.
So this is very common of Northern accents in England with words that end in Y, such as really, personally, and probably. If you'd like to improve your understanding of fast-speaking natives, then I highly recommend our Fluent with Friends course. In this 48-week course, you'll learn with the first 2 seasons of Friends. You'll receive PDF power lessons every week, vocabulary memorization software, access to our Fluency Circle global community, and so much more. And the best part is you can try it right now absolutely free with our 3-part masterclass. All you have to do is click up here or down in the description box below to learn more and sign up now. So now we're going to travel a bit further south to London, where the Queen lives in Buckingham Palace, and we're going to take a little look at how the Queen speaks. So the Queen has kind of her own style of RP, which is received pronunciation. And this type of accent is not spoken by a large percentage of the population. It's actually a very small percentage, and it's synonymous with class. So it's usually the upper classes that would speak this way. And also the BBC, it's known as the BBC English.
You see, it's much smaller, isn't it? I mean, it was the same height. You know, it would have been up to about there when my father wore it.
I mean, it was huge then.
Yes, very unwieldy.
It's difficult to always remember that diamonds are stones, so they're very heavy.
Yes. Fortunately, my father and I have about the same sort of shaped head. But once you put it on, it stays. I mean, it just remains itself.
You have to keep your head very still.
Yes. And you can't look down to read the speech. You have to take the speech up. Because if you did, your neck would break, or it'd fall off. So there are some disadvantages to crowns, but otherwise, they're quite important things.
So you'll notice that when the Queen speaks, her jaw is very stiff, so there's not a lot of movement around her mouth, and her lips also stay quite close together. One of the best ways to understand natives is by learning connected speech, and many people are quite surprised to hear that even the Queen sometimes speaks with connected speech. So you can hear here the way that she says, isn't it, is quite different, and she links those 2 words together to make it more natural as she speaks.
You see, it's much smaller, isn't it?
We also have some linking here where she says wore it. So that final sound, that R sound, links to it, and it sounds like wore it, wore it.
It was the same height. You know, it would have been up to about there when my father wore it.
Now, one very distinctive sound that the royal family has is the way they say off, the way they say the O sound. So I say it like this, off or often. However, they say it with an U sound. So they will say oof or oofen.
Because if you did, your neck would break, or it'd fall off.
It's very interesting the way that the Queen says yes as well. And there's this really funny clip where Olivia Colman, who plays the Queen in the series The Crown, actually teaches someone how to say yes as the royal family and as the Queen.
The royals have a whole other level of speaking. For example, can I teach you how to say yes?
Yes.
If you say E-A-R-S.
Ears?
That's yes. Ew.
I'm sorry. Say it as the Queen, please.
Is.
Yes.
If you'd like to learn English with Queen Elizabeth II and more about her pronunciation, then I highly recommend you check out this lesson we made by clicking up here or down in the description box below. So now we're staying in London, but we're going towards the east of London to learn more about the Cockney accent with David Beckham. So David Beckham was born and grew up in an area of East London called Leytonstone, so he does have quite a Cockney accent.
You know, he was a father figure for me for so many years. You know, he brought me to the club that I loved as a kid. I played for the club, I was successful at the club with, you know, a number of other of the young kids as well that we grew up with. So he gave me everything in my career that I needed, and so, you know, he'll always be the man that I always look up to because he gave me the dream of playing for Man United.
So who kind of held out the olive branch? Who kind of went, oh, look,
there was no olive branch. It was just, you know, we just bumped into each other at certain occasions after I'd left Manchester United, and, you know, there was things that upset me, and I'm sure, and well, there definitely was things that upset him. But like I said, you know, I have so much respect for him as a manager, as a man, and, you know, like I said, he gave me my dream.
In particular, we see the reduction of the TH sound again, like we did in Louis Tomlinson's accent, and it sounds more like a F sound.
I played for the club, I was successful at the club with, you know, a number of other of the young kids as well that we grew up with.
So in words such as father, with and everything, we hear David Beckham saying it with more of a F or a V sound. We can also hear again the reduction of the H and the glottal T, which is very typical of the Cockney accent.
You know, we just bumped into each other at certain occasions after I'd left Manchester United. And
another sound that you'll hear with the Cockney accent is that at the end of words when there's an ing, sometimes it changes to a k sound. So instead of saying everything, here David says everything.
So he gave me everything in my career that I needed, and so...
As we've spoken about this before, natives make mistakes too, and this is a very common one. So instead of saying were, he says was in these sentences.
You know, there was things that upset me, and I'm sure, and well, there definitely was things that upset him.
Now, the very talented singer Adele is also known for her very strong Cockney accent. So have a watch and see if there are any features of the Cockney accent you can hear in hers as well.
Thank you so much. To come back after so long away and be so warmly received is really lovely. Thank you so much. And to all the other girls that are nominated, thank you for letting me be in your company. You're all incredible, you're all amazing, and it's a privilege to be alongside you. I'd like to take a quick second just to thank my management and my record label for embracing the fact that I'm a woman and being encouraged by it. Thank you very much.
So now we're going to travel all the way up north to Scotland, and in particular Perth, where the famous actor Ewan McGregor is from. Now, the Scottish accent is a rhotic one, meaning that the R sound is pronounced in most words.
I mean, do you dress up for Halloween, or when you're an actor, is that not something?
No, we really dress up.
You really dress up?
I mean, we really, because that's what we do.
Right,
and we do it, I've done it over the years, many very successful costumes.
And are you going to have one this year?
This year, I'm not going to be here. I've got to go away, but I do enjoy it. I've been doing it since, you know, in Scotland we used to do it, and when we were kids, it was sort of different there, though. It wasn't trick-or-treating, we called it guising. And
guising?
Yeah, and you dressed up and you went out, and it didn't have to, as I recall, I mean, it's difficult to remember when you're 5 or 6 or 7, it didn't have to be all bloody and horror-y.
Right.
It was just, you just dressed up as someone.
Like disguising.
I think that's maybe where it came from. And you had to do a thing. You'd have to, I suppose, like trick-or-treating, although we didn't know that term then. you had to do a little song or a dance, or not a dance maybe, but a song or a poem.
Really?
Or tell a limerick or something, and then the person would give you a sweetie. We called it a candy.
So it was like a talent show in a way.
You expected to earn it. You had to earn it.
Wow.
With your creative talent.
So you might notice that it sounds a little bit more like the way they pronounce the R sound in American English as opposed to British English. The O sound as well is quite different in his accent. It's elongated and it's more at the front of the mouth. So instead of saying I know, it has more of an elongated sound and is at the front of the mouth.
I suppose like trick-or-treating, although we didn't know that term then.
There's also some connected speech here in the way that he says suppose. He shortens it to spose. So instead of saying I suppose, he says I suppose.
I suppose like trick-or-treating, although we didn't know that term then. I suppose like trick-or-treating.
Now, Ewan McGregor is a very famous Hollywood actor and he's made very many movies there. So his accent has been influenced a little bit by this. And you'll notice that he does tend to use the tap T quite a lot. So although he does also pronounce his T's, you'll also hear his tongue hit the roof of his mouth there with the American T. So now we're going to travel down just a little bit to Liverpool, and Liverpool has such a distinctive accent. It's actually only around 30 miles from Manchester, but the two accents are very different. So we are going to be taking an interview with Stephen Graham, who is a famous Hollywood actor, and you might actually not even realise that he's from Liverpool because he often plays characters that are from America, and his American accent is incredible.
You can do just about every accent. I've heard you do most accents. You're from Kirby, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm from Kirby,
which is just outside of Liverpool, I think.
Yeah, just on the outskirts.
But do you find it easier to slip into all the other ones?
I do, actually, if I'm honest. I must just be very lucky. I've got a good ear for it. But what I try to do is either be in that area for a little bit, or I'll watch programmes from where, where that area is set. I'll watch programmes where that's meant to be from. So, yeah, I've got a good ear for it, really.
So we call this accent the Scouse accent, which comes actually from a dish, a type of stew that was eaten by sailors down at the docks. So their accent is also heavily influenced by the Irish because it's very close by, and during the 19th and 20th centuries, there were many Irish settlers. So this can be one of the most difficult accents to understand, even for people from other parts of the UK, because there's a lot of connected speech involved.
Working with Pacino, I mean, that for an actor, I guess he's about as good as it gets as well, isn't he?
Of course, yeah. And there was a little... I'd kind of had an idea in our house when I was reading through, and so I started messing about. We shot it 3 times, and then on the third take, he's eating ice cream really slowly. And he's got this big scene, and he owes me £2 million. Do you know what I mean? I've known him for a while, and he's not giving me money. And
we should explain, this is in the film, not in real life.
Yeah, not in real life. Not in real life.
The characters, yeah.
The characters, yeah. He's Jimmy Hoffa, and he owes me $2 million. So he's eating his ice cream and all that and everything. And on the third go, I thought, right, I'm going to do it now. And I'd already planned this, but I told the cameraman and I told the props fella, and he's eating it, and he just puts his ice cream down, he's looking at me, and I just went, and I threw the bowl right across the room, and he went, oh! And then we carried on a little bit, and then Marty went, cut, and he went, did you see that, Marty? The kid frightened me.
The T's are quite distinctive, especially at the end of words, and they just link to the next words. So they do speak quite fast, and it can be quite difficult to decipher what someone is saying. You'll also hear the rolling of the R, especially at the end of words, and then again that links to the next one. So instead of saying our house, here he says our house.
I'd kind of had an idea in our house when I was reading through.
So if you've never heard this before, you might actually not even understand what words he is saying at all. We also have the reduction of the H again, so as you can tell, this is typical of many accents around the UK. And when he says right across here, that T at the end rolls into the next one. So just have a little listen again to how this sounds.
And I just went, and I threw the bowl right across the room, and he went, oh!
You might also notice that they have a very distinctive K sound. So it's very much at the back of the throat and is quite coarse. So when saying words like character and back, it's more, you have that coarse sound, so back. Of course, I'm no expert and I'm not great at doing different accents, so let's hear it again from Stephen Graham.
In real life, no.
Characters, yeah.
The characters, yeah. He's Jimmy Hoffa and he owes me $2 million.
Another aspect of the Scouse accent is that G is dropped at the end of certain words. So of the accents that you've learnt today, which one do you like the most? And are there any other British accents that you would like to be featured? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget that I've linked a lot of lessons down in the description box below that you can check out next, which I highly recommend you watch. But now it's time to go beyond the classroom and live your English. Ah, yeah. So we don't have time to look at all of them. There are very, very many, but we're going to start off by taking a look at a few in today's lesson.
There's got to be a difference between English guys and American guys, right?
Yeah, there's definitely one or two differences that I've noticed. English guys are like very well put together and they dress really well and they're like very well mannered.